Have you ever had your entire worldview shattered by a single question? Have you ever realized that something you believed with absolute certainty was actually built on nothing more than assumptions you never bothered to examine? Maybe you discovered that a person you trusted completely had been lying to you for years, or that a career path you were certain would make you happy left you feeling empty and lost. What if I told you that most of your suffering, most of your mistakes, and most of your limitations come not from external circumstances, but from assumptions you've never questioned? What if the very thoughts you trust most, your opinions about people, your beliefs about how the world works, your certainties about what will make you happy, are actually the invisible prison bars keeping you trapped in a life far smaller than what's possible? 2,500 years ago, a man walked the streets of Athens asking questions that made people so uncomfortable, so angry, so threatened that they eventually sentenced him to death. Socrates had discovered something that the powerful found dangerous and the comfortable found unbearable: that most of what we think we know is actually a collection of unexamined assumptions, and that our assumptions are often the greatest obstacle to truth, wisdom, and authentic living. Socrates famously declared, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." But this wasn't intellectual humility for its own sake. It was a revolutionary method for breaking free from the mental prisons that most people never even realize they're trapped inside. Today, we live in a world more full of assumptions than ever before. We assume we know what people think based on their social media posts. We assume we understand complex issues based on headlines we've skimmed. We assume we know what will make us happy based on what we see others pursuing. We assume we know who we are based on labels others have given us or roles we've fallen into. But what if all of these assumptions are not just wrong, but actively preventing you from discovering who you really are and what you're actually capable of? What if the moment you stop assuming and start questioning, everything in your life begins to transform in ways you never thought possible? If you're ready to follow Socrates into the uncomfortable but liberating territory of questioning everything you think you know, then stay with me. Because what you're about to discover won't just change how you think. It will change how you live, how you relate to others, and how you see yourself. But I must warn you, once you truly understand the power of the Socratic method, you can never go back to the comfortable ignorance of unexamined assumptions. The prison of unquestioned beliefs. Socrates spent his life encountering people who were absolutely certain they possessed knowledge, wisdom, and truth. Politicians who knew exactly how society should be run. Religious leaders who claimed direct access to divine will. Artists who were convinced their work revealed eternal beauty. Craftsmen who believed they understood not just their trade, but the nature of existence itself. Through his method of persistent questioning, what we now call the Socratic method, he exposed a disturbing pattern. The more certain someone was about their beliefs, the less they had actually examined them. Their confidence was built not on solid foundation, but on assumptions they had inherited, absorbed, or simply never bothered to question. This pattern hasn't changed in 25 centuries. Today, we encounter it everywhere. In political debates where people defend positions they've never seriously examined, in relationship conflicts where people make assumptions about their partner's motivations without ever asking, in career choices based on what others expect rather than genuine self-knowledge. The danger of assumptions isn't just that they might be wrong, it's that they become invisible to us. We stop seeing them as assumptions and start experiencing them as reality itself. Socrates understood that this psychological blindness was the root of most human suffering and limitation. Consider your own life for a moment. How many of your current problems stem from assumptions you've made? You assume your boss doesn't appreciate you because they didn't respond to your email immediately. You assume your friend is angry with you because they seemed distant last time you spoke. You assume you're not capable of starting your own business because you've never done it before. You assume you know what your spouse is thinking without actually asking them. Socrates would have approached each of these situations with questions designed to expose the assumptions lurking beneath the surface. How do you, No, your boss doesn't appreciate you. What evidence do you have beyond your interpretation of their email response time? What other explanations might exist for their behavior? How might your own assumptions be coloring your perception of the situation? This type of questioning isn't meant to create doubt for its own sake. It's meant to distinguish between what we actually know and what we merely assume we know. And this distinction, Socrates believed, was the beginning of all genuine wisdom and authentic living. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was deeply influenced by Socratic thinking, captured this principle perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But our reactions are almost always based on our assumptions about what's happening, not on what's actually happening. When we assume, we stop investigating, we stop learning, we stop growing. We become prisoners of our own unexamined beliefs, living in a world of our own mental construction rather than responding to reality as it actually is. The method of productive ignorance. What made Socrates truly revolutionary wasn't his brilliance. It was his willingness to embrace ignorance as a starting point for genuine learning. While others rushed to conclusions, he lingered in questions. While others sought to prove they were right, he sought to discover what was actually true. His method was deceptively simple. He would engage people in conversation about concepts they claimed to understand: justice, courage, love, beauty, goodness, and through careful questioning, reveal that neither he nor they actually understood these concepts as clearly as they had assumed. This wasn't intellectual cruelty or philosophical game-playing. Socrates understood something profound about how the human mind works. We cannot learn what we think we already know. As long as we assume we understand something, we close ourselves off to deeper understanding. Only by admitting our ignorance do we create space for genuine learning to occur. This principle applies to every area of life. In relationships, as long as we assume we know what our partner needs, we stop listening to what they're actually telling us. In our careers, as long as we assume we know what success looks like, we may miss opportunities that don't fit our preconceived notions. In personal growth, as long as we assume we know who we are, we remain trapped in identities that may no longer serve us. The Socratic method of productive ignorance involves several key practices. First, question your certainties. Whenever you find yourself absolutely certain about something, especially something involving human behavior, emotions, or motivations, pause and ask, how do I know this? What evidence do I have? What assumptions might I be making? Second, embrace not knowing. Instead of rushing to fill uncertainty with assumptions, learn to sit comfortably in the space of not knowing. This isn't ignorance. It's intelligent awareness of the limits of your knowledge. Third, seek understanding rather than being right. The goal isn't to prove your assumptions correct, but to discover what's actually true, even if that means abandoning beliefs you've held for years. Fourth, question your questions. Socrates understood that the quality of our questions determines the quality of our thinking. Ask yourself, am I asking questions that lead to deeper understanding, or am I asking questions designed to confirm what I already believe? This method of productive ignorance creates what psychologists now call cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt your thinking when presented with new information. People with high cognitive flexibility are more creative, better problem solvers, and more resilient in the face of change. The assumptions that limit your life. Most people live within invisible boundaries created by assumptions they've never examined. These assumptions operate like psychological prison walls. They're completely real in their effects, but they exist only in our minds. Socrates would have been fascinated by how these limiting assumptions manifest in modern life. Consider some of the most common ones. Assumptions about capability. I'm not smart enough for that. I'm too old to start something new. I don't have what it takes to succeed. These assumptions are rarely based on evidence. They're based on interpretations of past experiences, comparisons with others, or messages we've internalized from family, society, or culture. Socrates would ask, "How do you know you're not smart enough?" What exactly do you mean by smart enough? How are you measuring this? What evidence do you have that intelligence is fixed rather than developable? Who told you that you don't have what it takes, and what gives them the authority to make that determination? Assumptions about others. He doesn't care about me. She's trying to make me look bad. They think I'm incompetent. These assumptions create entire relationship dramas based on mind reading rather than actual communication. Socrates would probe, how do you know what they're thinking? What evidence do you have for their motivations? What other explanations might exist for their behavior? Have you actually asked them about their thoughts and feelings? Or are you assuming you already know? Assumptions about reality. The world is dangerous. People can't be trusted. Life is supposed to be fair. These fundamental assumptions about how reality works shape every decision we make and every opportunity we see or miss. Socrates would inquire, what do you mean by dangerous? Dangerous compared to what? How do you define trust? Where did you learn that life is supposed to be fair? What evidence supports this belief? Assumptions about happiness. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I need a relationship to be fulfilled. Success means financial security. These assumptions about what will make us happy often lead us to pursue goals that leave us feeling empty even when we achieve them. Socrates would challenge, how do you know that promotion will make you happy? What is happiness exactly? Have you examined whether your definition of success actually aligns with your values? Who taught you what fulfillment looks like? The power of Socratic questioning lies not in providing answers, but in revealing how many of our problems are created by assumptions we've never bothered to examine. When we start questioning these assumptions, we often discover that the limitations we thought were real were actually self-imposed. Breaking free through questions. The Socratic method isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a practical tool for breaking free from the mental patterns that keep us stuck. When you begin questioning your assumptions systematically, several profound shifts begin to occur. First, you develop what Socrates called intellectual humility, a realistic assessment of what you actually know versus what you assume you know. This humility isn't weakness, it's strength. It frees you from the exhausting burden of having to be right all the time and opens you to continuous learning and growth. Second, you become less reactive and more responsive. When you stop assuming you know what people mean, what situations require, or what outcomes are possible, you start responding to what's actually happening rather than to your mental interpretations of what's happening. Third, you discover options and possibilities that were invisible when you were trapped in assumptive thinking. The assumptions that limited your choices weren't real limitations. They were mental barriers that dissolved the moment you questioned them. The process of Socratic self-inquiry involves asking yourself increasingly penetrating questions. Level 1. Surface questioning. What am I assuming here? How do I know this is true? What evidence do I have? Level 2. Deeper inquiry. Where did this belief come from? Who taught me to think this way? What would I think if I had grown up in a different culture or family? Level 3. Fundamental examination. What assumptions am I making about the nature of success, happiness, love, security? How do I know these definitions are correct for me? Level 4. Meta-questioning. What assumptions am I making about assumptions themselves? How might I be limiting myself in ways I can't even see? This process can be uncomfortable because it requires letting go of the certainty that assumptions provide. As the psychologist Daniel Kahneman observed, our minds are designed to create coherent stories even when we don't have complete information. We fill in gaps with assumptions because uncertainty feels threatening. But Socrates understood that this discomfort is the price of growth. He compared himself to a midwife, helping people give birth to insights that were already within them but couldn't emerge as long as false assumptions blocked the way. The questions themselves become a practice of mental liberation. Each time you catch yourself making an assumption and choose to question it instead, you strengthen your capacity for clear thinking and authentic living. The ripple effects of non-assumptive living. When you truly embrace the Socratic approach of questioning assumptions, the changes extend far beyond your thinking patterns. Your entire way of being in the world begins to transform. In relationships, you stop assuming you know what others think, feel, or need, and you start actually asking them. This creates deeper intimacy and connection because people feel seen and heard rather than judged and analyzed. Conflicts decrease because many arguments are actually based on misunderstandings rooted in false assumptions about the other person's motivations or meanings. In your career, you stop assuming you know what's possible for you and start exploring based on genuine curiosity about your capabilities and interests. You stop assuming you know what success means and start defining it based on your actual values rather than inherited expectations. In personal growth, you stop assuming you know who you are based on past experiences or others' definitions, and you start discovering who you're becoming through present moment awareness and experimentation. This shift from assumptive to investigative living creates what philosophers call beginner's mind, approaching each situation with fresh curiosity rather than preconceived notions. The Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi captured this beautifully. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. When you stop assuming, you also stop limiting. You discover that many of the boundaries you thought were real were actually mental constructions that dissolved the moment you questioned them. Opportunities that were invisible become obvious. Solutions that seemed impossible become achievable. The ancient Greek concept of aporia, the state of being puzzled or perplexed, becomes not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be entered. Socrates understood that this state of productive confusion was often the beginning of genuine insight. Modern neuroscience supports this ancient wisdom. When we question our assumptions, we activate what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the brain's ability to form new neural pathways and see situations from multiple perspectives. This flexibility is associated with creativity, problem-solving ability, and psychological resilience. Living the questions. Socrates spent his life demonstrating that the quality of our questions determines the quality of our existence. He showed that people who ask shallow questions live shallow lives, while those who ask profound questions discover profound possibilities. But living the questions requires courage because it means giving up the false security of assumptive thinking. It means becoming comfortable with not knowing, with uncertainty, with the ongoing process of discovery, rather than the illusion of having arrived at final answers. This doesn't mean becoming paralyzed by doubt or unable to make decisions. It means holding your beliefs and decisions lightly, remaining open to new information and willing to adjust course when evidence suggests a different direction. The practice becomes a way of life, questioning your assumptions about what you need to be happy, about what others expect from you, about what's possible in your career, your relationships, your personal growth. Each assumption you examine and release creates space for more authentic choices and genuine fulfillment. Socrates understood that this process never ends. Even on his deathbed, when offered the chance to escape execution, he continued questioning, examining his assumptions about death, about loyalty to the state, about what it means to live with integrity. His final act was consistent with his life's work, choosing truth over comfort, questions over assumptions. The ripple effects extend beyond individual transformation. When you stop assuming you know what's best for others, you become more truly helpful. When you stop assuming you understand complex issues completely, you become more genuinely wise. When you stop assuming you know how things should be, you become more capable of responding skillfully to how things actually are. Your liberation begins now. If this exploration of Socratic wisdom has stirred something within you, if you recognize the ways assumptions have been limiting your life, then you're ready to begin the most important investigation you'll ever undertake: the examination of your own unquestioned beliefs. Start small, but start today. Choose one area of your life where you've been struggling or feeling stuck and ask yourself, what am I assuming here that I've never actually questioned? Don't try to answer immediately. Sit with the question and let it work on you. Begin noticing how often you operate from assumptions rather than actual knowledge. Pay attention to how many of your emotional reactions are based on interpretations rather than facts. Observe how many of your limitations exist only in your mind. If this journey into the power of questioning resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations of ancient wisdom that can transform modern life. And please, share in the comments one assumption you're ready to question. Your willingness to examine your own beliefs might inspire others to do the same. The next video will explore how to develop the courage to live with uncertainty while still making effective decisions. Because, as Socrates showed us, the goal isn't to eliminate all assumptions. It's to hold them lightly and remain always open to deeper truth. Remember his fundamental insight: the unexamined life is not worth living. But the examined life, the life where assumptions are questioned, beliefs are held lightly, and truth is valued over comfort. That life is not just worth living. It's the only life that leads to genuine wisdom, authentic relationships, and lasting fulfillment. Your liberation from the prison of unexamined assumptions begins the moment you start asking, how do I know this is true? That question, asked with genuine curiosity and courage, has the power to transform everything. The only question remaining is, are you ready to stop assuming and start discovering who you really are and what you're truly capable of?